Great. Thanks so much, Nirja and Nicole, for putting today together and also for inviting Vaughn and I to serve as guest editors for the special section. We were really excited when we were invited to serve as guest editors. As former New York City Public High School English teachers and current faculty in Michigan State University's College of Education, we seek to engage, amplify, and encourage research taken up alongside youth through participatory approaches. When we put together the call for proposals for this special section, we were hopeful that we would receive manuscripts that might work individually and collectively to move the field forward in new and productive ways. We are so thrilled that the authors who contributed their fantastic work to this special section have done that and so much more.
So thanks so much, Nirja and Nicole and Patricia for having us, and authors, and also reviewers. And it's great to see folks here and see some family and peers and friends. And so in framing this issue, we really sought to underscore the urgency of how youth and young adults today in the US and globally are increasingly envisioning, organizing, and leading contemporary movements toward justice across a range of formal and informal contexts, and within and beyond schools, communities, and university campuses. So in doing so, we know that youth demonstrate their participatory, communal, lived civic engagement, and they extend their intersectional identities across contexts of race, gender, sexuality, immigration status, language, disability. We see, for example, in news headlines, right? We don't have to go far. We just turn on the news, how youth have focused attention on structural and systemic racism and Black Lives Matter activism, how youth have urged university officials and roads must fall and fees must fall protests in South Africa to decolonize curriculum and halt tuition fees. Youth have led marches and demonstrations for justice for International Women's Day in Mexico City. And just in the last few weeks, or just in the last week actually, propelled vibrant calls for reliable and affordable access to electricity and water in Madagascar, protested gun violence in the March for Our Lives rallies in Washington, D.C., supported efforts globally toward climate and environmental justice and indigenous water rights. So what I'm noting here is youth critical engagement, and youth critical engagement has prompted educators and administrators to revise curriculum, teaching, and policy. And think about this, right? Youth efforts have prompted educators and administrators to do these things across the range of formal and informal secondary and higher ed settings. Yet, at the same time, conventional framings of service learning have rendered less visible the interplay of youth's intersectional identities and their social, civic, educational potential contributions as youth critical engagement. And so this brings us to this urgent, exciting special issue, special section of the Michigan Journal of Community Service Learning, which we're so fortunate to have the opportunity to be a part of. This issue centers Youth Participatory Action Research, or YPAR as the authors will share, as a promising, productive approach for building with and extending the interplay of voices, perspectives, intersectional identities of youth as the enacting of contemporary movements toward justice in this ongoing quest for social justice.
So specifically, we welcome for inclusion in this special section renderings within and across contexts of service learning that foreground such participatory approaches. So such critical teaching and research stances actively engage young people in creating and developing knowledge about the issues that impact their lives and using their knowledge to take action. Such engagements involve youth-led efforts and youth-adult partnership efforts, among others, and in all cases center the meaningful and authentic role of young people within and across the research and knowledge development endeavor. YPAR challenges positivistic notions of researcher objectivity, instead considering youth as producers of knowledge whose lived experiences and perspectives provide valuable insight for examining the issues that matter to them. So this special section includes submissions from school and community-based educators, researchers, and collaborative teams that include youth. Authors co-composed manuscripts with a range of communities, including youth in and out of community and school settings, students across secondary and higher education contexts, educators and staff in secondary, higher education, and community settings, teacher educators, youth and adults in community-based organizations and community organizing settings, along with administrators and policymakers. So again, we're just really grateful to all of the authors who contributed their work to this fantastic special section. Again, we just want to thank Nicole, Nirja, Patricia, and reviewers for all of the work that went into this special section and also today's event. And just want to say before we hear from the authors that the manuscripts included in this special section provide so many opportunities for learning from and with youth perspectives in action across a variety of contexts. So at this point, Vaughn and we're really excited to turn things over to the author teams and to learn with their writing processes. So the first team that we will hear from are the authors of No Filter, exploring the experiences of BIPOC students at an HPWI.
Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Nicole Aguilar, and I'm currently a PhD candidate at the University of Colorado Boulder. My co-authors were Rakaya Abdulamer, Andrea Torres, Nidia Salazar, Taya Hopkins, and Algasimo Diallo. Those co-authors were five undergraduate BIPOC students. Within our approach to our manuscript, of course, we used participatory action research and photo voice approaches. Particularly within the writing process, we also maintained a participatory writing process. One of the first things we did was identified mentor texts. So texts that we felt exemplified and kind of did the work that we were aspiring to do within a manuscript. And we looked at what role each part of the manuscript played, and even broke down sentences to understand what role sentences play within the broader argument that the mentor text was trying to say and voice. We had weekly team meetings throughout the writing process, as well as one-on-one meetings between me and the 5 undergraduate students for additional writing mentorship and support. And of the 5 undergraduate students, 4 of them see themselves pursuing graduate degrees, including PhDs. And so this was an opportunity to kind of create a pipeline and mentorship through hands-on experience for 5 undergraduate BIPOC students. When it comes to practical application and field impact, it was really about rethinking how we understand a sense of belonging for BIPOC students at universities, including their co-curricular academic experiences. So we know that recruitment alone of BIPOC students is not enough. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was creating a call to action that came from the voices and the experiences within the photo voice process. So that call to action included decentering whiteness, supporting counterspaces, microaffirmations, disrupting and remediating socially engineered injustices, intergenerational mentorship, race-conscious and justice-centered resources. So overall, the experience was not just doing the study, but also working and uplifting participatory action research within the writing process to rethink and understand who knowledge creators and academics can be, and helping build that journey for the future of academia. So that's what I have for you today. I look forward to being in small groups with you all and speaking a little bit more about our study. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And really enjoying, and what I find myself already doing is thinking across the sort of collaborative themes that we're going to hear, thinking about who the participants are, the range of ways that we're expanding notions of scholarship and who is an author and who may be a scholar. And so thank you again for that work. And next, we're going to hear from the authors of A Descriptive Narrative of a Latinx Research Practice Partnership to Develop the Roots E-Resistance Intervention.
I got started and didn't realize I was muted. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Adriana Aldana. I'm a professor of social work at California State University Dominguez Hills. I'm delighted to be here speaking on this project on behalf of my colleagues and collaborators. My co-authors include the PI, Dr. Josefina Bañales, who is a professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago, and many of our youth collaborators that include youth in high school who have now transitioned into undergraduate students, as well as graduate and post-baccalaureate students as well. And then a shout out to a co-PI, Dr. Deborah Rivas-Drakes at the University of Michigan, who isn't a co-author on this article, but is involved in the project. And to start, I actually want to begin with the practical applications and field impact, in part because our aims for this paper were also motivated by what we wanted to contribute to the field. We were in the kind of early phases of this project where we were conceptualizing a YPAR project to center youth voice in the creation of an intervention to develop and foster Latino youth, Latina youth's anti-racist action and identity development. And so part of that work had begun with adults, like much of YPAR, especially if you're thinking about funding, usually happens with academics who are talking to community partners who work with young people. And so we were in the midst of shifting and pivoting from those early ideation conversations into really thinking about how do we integrate youth voice from the very beginning as we're thinking about seeking funding for this work, as we're developing the protocols for IRB. And so this shift really transitioned us into thinking about what does it mean to build capacity so that young people across the spectrum, whether they're adolescents or they're current students in higher ed at whatever level, can be involved in the decision-making process along with us, the faculty and the PIs on this project. And so a lot of that work initiated with us thinking about what kind of relationship, what kind of container do we want to create for the young people that are going to be involved. And so what are some trainings and capacity building so that they can take ownership progressively throughout the process. And so it was in those conversations that we realized oftentimes we didn't have articles or scholarship to cite how you get into this work. How do you reach out to young people? How do young people get involved in early phases of a research or YPAR project or even intervention development? And the call for papers came right at the same time that we were kind of exploring and thinking about writing something. So it was really opportune. And the way that we got involved in the writing was thinking about telling our collective story through counter storytelling or critical race theory methodology of centering the perspective of marginalized researchers, in this case, a collective of Latina researchers, but also youth partners in that process. To create a collaborative writing process, we did a lot of storytelling through pláticas, reflections through journaling, both individual journaling as well as collective writing. And the plática is really centered around like, how do we see our positionality in relationship to this work? So how do we see ourselves as racialized members of society? What does it mean to be anti-racist and Latina in the US in the current times? What does that mean for our research? What does that mean for the motivations for this project? And then for young people also, like, what does it mean to be in partnership with adults in a project like this? What can support your leadership development? And so in that kind of reflection was also part of the writing for this paper. And what we hope we did was to not only write something that others can glean from, but we also created a co-learning opportunity for us in the project to refine and reiterate some of our earlier decision-making processes in the ways that we were going to pivot to collect data to then inform the intervention that we're hoping to create. I believe that's all I'll say for now, but I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation in our small groups. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's going to be hard, I think, for our audience members to choose which of these small groups that they will participate in. So I'll just wait 1 second for our next slide to advance. Okay, so the next authors we will hear from are from the paper We Got Us, the process of engaging youth as participants and co-researchers.
Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Erica Powell-Rencher, currently serving as the Assistant Director in the Institute for Community and Economic Engagement at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. Also serving a lot of community capacities here in the city, and just grateful to be here. Thank you for the time. This manuscript was produced in collaboration with the co-researchers that you see in the bottom right corner. They are me, Gabby Simpson, Jemiah Cawthorn, Brianna Thomas-Forster, Emmanuel Jones, and we have a junior co-researcher, Kai, who now is 3 years old, 2 years old. Kai's 2 years old, but she was hanging tough with us. The writing process actually started during the research, right? The layers of analysis that we completed on the data, observation on the artifacts, the art artifacts, photo voice, images that we captured. Each day we reviewed our observation journals, and we made notes, started making connections. And of course, then there was a memoing for me. We had a data analysis retreat, and then there was more data analysis. So a lot of the narrative that came out of these layers were the beginnings of our writing, if you will. I had several conversations with mentors who helped me to think about the many hats that I wear, and the one that needed to be in place for this work. So the one that needed to be in place for this work was the scholar administrator, right, of community engaged scholarship. So just thinking about how I am going to talk to the field about how I did this work, as opposed to my other hat, one of my other hats, which is the actual like community engaged scholar, right? The practitioner, in the work. And so there is a distinction between those two. And so just naming that and making sure that I'm speaking from that place. And as I was going through the writing. The next steps in the writing process, as I had the right hat on, was thinking about the steps that the co-researchers and I took to get this data collected. And it was a wonderful experience. Right in the bottom left corner, we had a camp-like pop-up that was art-based and fun, and we were all in with our participants, and it was amazing 4-day experience. And so chronicling that in the writing of this manuscript was the next part, taking care to make sure that I was using language that was accessible and we could communicate what actually happened. And then capturing the co-researchers' experiences. The co-researchers at the time were undergrad and working. And now some have graduated undergrad. And so, yeah, what I did was kind of try to gauge how they felt before, during, and after in a series of questions that I asked them to write. Sometimes we would have conversations about their experiences, perspectives in the research process, and then try to incorporate it in, and then looping back to them to make sure that I was speaking correctly for what they said. In terms of application and impact, when you're thinking about impact, I would say if you're trying to communicate your work to the field, that was the purpose of this, know the hats that you're wearing, right? This means understanding the parts of your scholar identity, and then understanding what part you feel most comfortable in. And it may not be writing about the scholarship, right? It may be engaging in the research, which this is me, right? I'm more comfortable sort of in the work, participating in the knowledge production, being in the community doing the work. And that's okay, that wherever you find your comfort, it'll just be important for you to put on the hat that you need, right? When you need to communicate, disseminate, right, the work, right? So this is why mentors in the field are important to help you articulate the work that you're doing. And a nod to those veterans in the field, please mentor, mentor and pay it forward to those younger scholars coming up like myself. Thinking about relationships, right? They're central. I had known the co-researchers for 4 years before we began this work. And even then we had to reconnect. We had to catch up on each other's lives before we shifted into looking at this this idea of joy in young people. And so yeah, I think it's important that we expect that this work will take time, more time likely than we have in the institution, right, in the academy, and that we want to just be creative to hold our priorities that we have in the institution, but then also the priorities of sustaining relationships. One story in particular I'll lift up is that the analysis, we were doing all of the analysis together, and the last day, we got to the last day and we had some more, you know, artifacts to get through, some more photo voice pieces to get through. But one of our co-researchers, Jemiah, she couldn't be with us the entire retreat. And so we opted not to finish that analysis together and to go to her house and have pizza with her, because she was at the house. It was, you know, she had a newborn. We had to make a decision to value the relationship over that. And of course, the rest of that analysis fell on me. So yeah. And then in terms of community engagement, mutual benefit is really important. And we want to just make sure that we are offering pathways so that mutual benefit can be fulfilled, right? The young folks are going to say what they're going to say. They're going to teach, they're going to lead, and offer those pathways. And I think critical arts-based methods are ways for us to get closer to that mutual benefit. Yeah. And then of course, near peer diversity and age is really, it was the cream of the crop for me. I would not have been able to do this work without the co-researchers' perspectives and their work. So thank you. I look forward to speaking to you.
Thanks so much. Y'all see what we're saying here in terms of just so excited for folks to engage in conversation and learning with one another. Just so many takeaways. So our next paper, just really continuing the conversation, right? And so really just thinking across the papers, and you're taking notes and taking takeaways and engaging in small group conversation. Facilitar no es fácil. Latina high school students as indicators of Spanish community service learning during the pandemic. So excited to hear from authors for this paper.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes? Hello, everyone. I'm Teresa Satterfield Linares. I'm actually a former high school teacher, currently professor at the University of Michigan, and the director of the nonprofit community outreach academic program in Nuestra Lengua. My co-authors, Angel Benqui and Mira Pandy, you can see their photos in the lower right-hand corner. They can't be here today. And we actually started working together to develop this project several years ago. I call it year one. It's actually just like Professor Richards' comment, it happened over a period of about 5 years. And due to triggering experiences from COVID and some trauma that they faced, the year two research, our final projects didn't actually begin until they were juniors in high school. And now they're both freshmen in college, and they're sending their regrets. I'm happy to say that they're both finding ways to organize and engage in community service in their respective universities. And we also wanted to thank very much Professors Marciano and Watson for this amazing opportunity and the wonderful collection of articles. And we're citing all of you. We use these a lot in our work. So just really quickly, what motivated our study was back in spring 2020. Our Spanish program in Nuestra Lengua was trying to find a way to maintain our 50 plus middle school students in their weekly book club, the Club Lector. We wanted to do something remote, and so we approached the student-led organization By Kids for Kids. This is all in Southeast Michigan, I should add, about a partnership. And so they were having a very much success of doing buddy reading with Kindles. And so we did a partnership. The By Kids for Kids supplied in Nuestra Lengua with Kindles, and in turn, in Nuestra Lengua, created activities in Spanish. We onboarded our own Spanish-speaking high school community service learners as facilitators to guide a group of middle school readers in Spanish for the Club Lector. The writing process when we were finally writing up the research, I worked with the two student administrators, which were Mira and Angel, and they had so many ideas and also questions. So we started meeting bi-weekly. We read and summarized articles, and we were just thinking about what was the impact of this project. And they really were fascinated with the community and cultural wealth model by Tara Yoso. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but it presents a conceptual lens so that you view this richly layered complexity of the Latino college student experience, really. And it shows this inventory of collective skills that BIPOC individuals cultivate and call upon as protective capital to counteract oppressive and racist narratives. And it's been used particularly in higher education settings, but Mira and Angel, it just resonated with them. They wanted to introduce a novel implementation of this model, investigating the Latino teens in our project. So we're talking about students ages 14 to 17 who were participating as the facilitators in this Spanish language community service learning experience. So they served as facilitators for virtual Spanish book clubs that met weekly in the 2021 academic year during the pandemic. And so each facilitator was overseeing readings and discussions for an assigned group of younger Latino readers. And so having this access to reading for our research led us to a couple of questions. First, as many people have already said about their articles and research, we found that the factors conducive to Latino high school youth engagement in community service learning had not been widely studied. And previous research was showing that in general, young people of color are much less likely to participate in formally structured community service projects than their white peers, and that we hypothesize that Latino students' non-participation, if that's actually the case in community service, it might be due to how they perceive that the institutions push them out due to immigration history, racism, social class, language-based discrimination, and now we see this political backlash against Latinos and the Latino community. And so we wanted to investigate whether the teen book club facilitators were drawing on values and wisdom from the Latino community or their own Latina positionalities to carry out their community service learning role. And so we predicted that if they were utilizing values from the Latino community, then these aspects could be encoded as the cultural capital that Yoso had kind of outlined. And so we were identifying that in our data, which consisted of the facilitators' meeting notes, individual weekly online surveys, and collaborating teaching forums. And so I just want to emphasize that all the materials for the projects were exclusively in Spanish. And so as you can see, we found that there was a very high level of service learner engagement, and cultural capital was found most strongly associated with linguistic and social wealth. And the students who were facilitating had many references to being a Spanish speaker in the US. And so even though they noted that facilitar no es nada fácil, so facilitating is nothing easy to do, they thought that it was a valuable experience and it gave them a sense of leadership and membership in the community that they hadn't had before. And so despite negative stereotypes that Latino teens might face regarding their lack of community engagement, it really might be the case that students are searching for ways to support their communities. And so we found that possibly tailoring activities that emphasize specific cultural capital properties and resources that Latino students can bring can be a way to draw in more Latino youth. And then I just really quickly wanted to note the YPAR impact, because again, for me, this was the most valuable and fulfilling experience, so gratifying for me as a university professor to go back and work with high school students and just show the many ways in which Latino teens are leveraging elements of cultural capital to become empowered as community leaders. We followed the YPAR tenets, and the power was shared between me and my co-authors in designing, carrying out, writing up this study. And I think it just shows how accessible these kind of projects can be. And finally, I'll just end by inviting you all to read our paper and note that the final words are the youth researchers' voices offering their recommendations for institutions and partners to support US-born Spanish-speaking youth in maintaining their identities and the wealth of cultural capital that they bring to their communities. Thanks. I look forward to speaking with everyone.
Thank you so much. And it's really exciting. I hope everyone who's participating can start to see some of these themes that came out across each of these wonderful papers. So thank you. The next group that we will be hearing from, the title of their manuscript is Taking a Cubist Approach, the Importance of Youth-Produced Knowledge in Multi-Generational Communities.
Thank you so much. What a rich and exciting group of authors. I'm so honored to be here. So I'm Nastasia, one of the authors on this paper. And this was a really kind of emergent, almost spontaneous project. I was sort of captivated by the idea of cubism as an art form that shows multiple perspectives on one canvas without placing them into a hierarchy. And the visual can be kind of chaotic and messy, and we're sort of squinting to see like what's what. But if we take a step back, we can just really appreciate the multi-dimensional depictions within one space. So my co-author Zoe Black is here, and so I'm going to turn it over to her to explain a little bit about our writing process before we talk about the practical application.
Hi, my name is Zoe Black. I'm currently a senior at Clark University, and when we started working on this, I was actually a senior in high school, and I had met Natty through working on an AP research project in my senior year of high school. So as I was wrapping up that year, Natty reached out to me to work on this paper with her, and I was so excited getting like AP research, getting into research. I was like, yes, I would love to. And she presented this idea of cubism, this showing 3D objects all in the same plane and applying that to multiple perspectives, multi-generational knowledges. And so we started having conversations about this, about cubism, about multi-generational spaces and multi-generational knowledges. And we were doing this in person with our third co-author, Amira, who could not be with us today, but was definitely part of this conversations that were a multi-generational space in and of themselves, because I was at that time in high school, Amira was already in college, and Natty was the like adult perspective for that. And we recorded these conversations, which then we were able to transcribe them and look for some themes that were coming out, which I'll pass it back to Natty to talk about those themes.
Yeah, so we really used our conversations as this iterative process of coding them separately and then coming back together to see, what themes we had pulled out in common, where we were differing, and then we would have conversations on the conversations, and then kind of check back in with each other and think about, is the trajectory of our conversation and our writing sort of fitting in with these themes, or are we starting to create new themes, or sort of reframe the themes we had come up with? And so we used our own dialogue as data, really prioritizing storytelling and vulnerability and kind of grappling. And also, we were in this academic space. We were as Zoe mentioned, both she and Amira were students, and I was a full-time faculty at the time. And we were in this really academic space, really trying to elbow out some room for other types of knowledges, of lived experiences, of the sort of curiosity and the grappling over the knowing. And the other thing that we really tried to do, that we were a little bit forced to do, maybe, right, Zoe, but also really leaned into it, was honoring the timing. As Zoe mentioned, she is now a senior in college, and so that kind of gives you a sense of how long it took us to grapple through this work. And I think that was a really important part of our process, to recognize that really authentic, relational, community engaged work doesn't always follow the academic calendar. In fact, it rarely follows the academic calendar, right? So we really had to kind of slow down, sink in, allow ourselves to go back, to reprocess, to follow our curiosity, in order to produce the kind of work that felt really authentic to the three of us with different perspectives, so that we could really sort of mirror a cubist painting in our paper, with these different perspectives all shown on one plane. So we came up with this sort of cup of a cubist approach that that prioritizes plurality, reciprocity, and joy. The plurality being that that knowledges are not hierarchical, right? That they exist in this space, that they all have validity and they all contribute to a collective, diverse body of knowledge. The reciprocity piece of it, I think, as the adult in the room, I think was really important for me in sort of taking accountability for the power dynamics that emerge in these types of spaces. And so understanding that we are both knowers and learners at the same time, and that we're coming into this space with confidence and surety in what we know, in our lived experience, and also humility and curiosity in what we don't know and how we learn. And I think that one of the things that we bumped into in our conversations was that sometimes community engaged research, especially multi-generational work, kind of positions the involvement of youth as really just beneficial to them, that, you know, it boosts their confidence, it allows them to participate, and it sort of takes this benevolent lens on, you know, how youth are able to come into this space. And this idea of reciprocity for me was that, you know, youth knowledge benefits all of us, that we all have things to learn from each other. And so it was another sort of attempt to level out some of these kind of automatic hierarchies that occur in multi-generational spaces. And then, of course, joy. You know, I'm seeing that in all of the other papers, is this undertone of joy, that being in spaces with people that we can learn from, people that we can mentor, folks that we can have fun with and do really important work with, remembering to prioritize the joy in those spaces was deeply important to us. So I see this framework as, for me, a model of accountability. So when I'm in multi-generational spaces, this has given me sort of a linguistic scaffold to say, you know, am I prioritizing plurality, reciprocity, and joy? And how can I do more of those things? So back to Zoe for how you practically apply this.
I think, first of all, that when I started working with Nadi, I hadn't taken any classes with her. And once I had reached like university and I was able to take 2 classes with her, I began to see the way that she implements these 3 principles into her classroom. And so being able to see that from like the student side and feel the way that the classroom environment felt different was very impactful, and like influence the way that I am in pretty much every space, in classrooms and outside of classrooms. So at the beginning of the semester, when we're like making those norms about how we want to interact with each other in the classroom, I always try to bring in some points that have these 3 principles in them, so that the general classroom can try and feel more collaborative. And recently we even, because usually we make these at the beginning of the semester and then they're kind of forgotten about, but in one of my classes, we checked back in, and people said that the ones that I had suggested with these principles made them feel more comfortable to share in class. I see you have to wrap up. So looking forward to speaking with everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. We're getting so much from these, and again, so excited for folks to have the opportunity to talk with one another in a few moments. And speaking of the relational, because so much of this that y'all are thinking are prompting us to think about the relational. Let's just take 1 minute and just drop in the, I guess it's the chat, or I think it's called the chat. Drop in there just your name and where you're from. Just 1 minute or so. I think that's just a really robust way us getting a sense of how broad this community is. And as you're doing that, I'll just note and share how excited we were to think with the interdisciplinarity of this work. It is really exciting as you move into the issue and you think with the issue to engage and see just the range of departments where folks are, the types of work, the methodological practices that folks are engaging, the theories that, uh, so many of the theories, of course, generative and assets-based theories that folks are engaging. So I'm just gonna, another 15 seconds or so while folks are adding their name and where they're from, and then we'll move with the next speaker.
And thank you all so much for making time to be here today. It's really exciting to see how many different perspectives we have represented. So thank you.
All right, we're really excited to continue the conversation and the learning with the authors of In the Shoes That I'm In Now, an intergenerational community archiving framework centering critical youth participatory action research.
Hello, everyone. My name is Isaiah Lassiter. I'm a fourth-year PhD candidate at Drexel University and a graduate researcher at the Joy Education Research Lab, which stands for Justice-Oriented Youth Education Lab at Drexel University, founded by Dr. Ayana Allen-Handy, who is also a co-author on this paper. In the shoes I'm in is also, and I'm in now is a quote from one of our youth who participated in our Critical Youth Participatory Action Research program, which is an intergenerational community archiving program that pretty much started in West Philadelphia. West Philadelphia High School is what centers and grounds this work. And it's a relationship between the University Drexel, Joy Lab, the alumni of West Philadelphia High, as well as the West Philadelphia high school itself and its students. I am here to represent my other co-authors. I believe one is here in transit who may be able to pop in the breakout room, but I also want to recognize Haley, Dr. Ayana, Jayana, one of our youth, Q-Day, one of our youth as well, Jasmine, our youth, Ishmael, one of our youth, Dr. Alescante, Mr. Ray, Miss Nettles, Miss Goldsmith-Carter, Miss Allen, who are our elders, community researchers, and Miss Wilkers-Walker, who is our CTE teacher within the high school, who is the founding teacher of this program, essentially, along with our professor, Dr. Ayana Alahandi. So our writing process, I would say, initially started in action with the Becoming Critical Scholars paper that was published in 2018. Our framework that we used for this paper extends the framework that we used there, which was the Social Justice Youth Development Framework. And in that framework, there were three aspects to it: is self-awareness, social awareness, and global awareness. And so the project was centering youth and to develop them as critical scholars and researchers, not only in the development of their self-awareness as such, and then connecting that to the social issues that are occurring around them, as well as the global issues that are going on that extends from the community. So taking that framework, really building on that work, what started the project was Philadelphia, like many urban areas, is going through rapid gentrification, and through decades of disinvestment from the school district into the school became unoccupiable essentially, and the city sold the school and sold it to a developer who turned it into high-end condos. And so throughout that process of transitioning, of closing the school, building a new school, and transitioning people and things from one school to the other, a lot of the artifacts from 1911 to now were lost. Many of them were destroyed. And so this project came about, led by community member Miss Allen, just from a flippant remark of maybe we should start looking for these things, essentially, these things that we've lost since the school has closed, and try to digitize them and archive them so that we can preserve the history and our memories and the legacy of this school that has been around for 100 years plus and is a staple in the Black community, essentially. And so the intervention sparked this project, a non-linear process, collective and democratic process, very culturally responsive to preserve the history and the legacy of the school. We move at the speed of relationships. Just a little plug there. That's a book chapter that's in peer review right now that'll be coming out soon, that explains how the Joy Lab as a whole, how we connect with the communities, other members of the university, and how we sustain our relationships and our partnerships with the community members, our elders, our youth, as well as our for-profit and nonprofit partnerships to continue to doing the work that we do. And also investing in centering joy. We center joy in our purpose, center joy and invest joy in our people, in our places, projects, and practices, all in an attempt to untap that potential of intergenerational community engagement and partnership through social justice-oriented and human-centered practices. And here's the framework that we used for our paper, which kind of sums it up. And we have this university community school looking at pre-K through 12, and our population was high school students, seniors. We have 4 students, Jayana, by the 1-star, Jayana, Jasmine, and Ishmael and Q-Day. Q-Day and Jayana actually was one of the original youth of the program. That's when it originally started in 2019. And Jayana is now a undergrad at Drexel University, still continuing, and will be the lead of this project this year, since I am no longer on the team, but happy to represent them. So good for her. And so our framework really brings this together and builds on the impact of what we try to do together as building knowledge together, applying knowledge, disseminating knowledge, and preserving knowledge. And the impact and the practical applications is based on our findings. We found that students were able to develop a sense of self-awareness as critical scholars, also build a connection and respect for the community and connection with the elders, and the truth and wisdom about the history of their school and the community that they did not know because it happened so long ago, it wasn't taught to them, and things like that. And also through this process, I learned things about the Philadelphia community, West Philadelphia community that I grew up in that I didn't even know. And so here are some direct quotes from the students that you can see there. It changed my perspective on different things, letting me know the history of school, even the history just of my community, especially my mindset. From Ishmael, I just explained everything to her. It definitely advanced me in my major when it came about him interacting with the professor during his freshman year of college and how this program impacted him and his knowledge there. And then Jasmine, the activities like helping us get ready for college and stuff and exposing us to other paths like dual degree. That was through the partnerships and intergenerational knowledge that, we were sharing amongst each other that, helped them with that. And then the field impact and scholarly impact, it provides a model for sustainable university school community programming, and centering the school is the school, West Philadelphia High School, that connects the university and the community members together. And this project has been going on for 5+ years, and I started in 2022. So it was going on prior to me, and I came on and was happy to keep it going for as long as I was able to. And then promoting the community cultural wealth of our intergenerational community, and also development of early youth scholars and as critical thinkers, because now many of them are taking the skills that they have learned and learn things that have learned about themselves and able to apply it in different aspects of their lives, as well as in college and career. and look forward to speaking to you all in the breakout room.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I really love the emphasis we're hearing over the last couple of presentations about focusing on joy, and just really appreciate that. All right, so our next co-authors are of the piece, Kinship and Being Together Otherwise in Community-University Partnerships.
All right, thank you so much. And it's such an honor to be here with all of you. So my name is Anita Chikatur, and I teach at Carleton College in Minnesota, and I'm here with my co-author and comrade, Abby Rumbalski, who teaches at the University of Minnesota. So I want to say that, as we were thinking about this writing process question, I want to say that our writing process really drew on the kinds of kinship practices that we detail in the article. We didn't necessarily start off the collaboration that we discuss in the article thinking that we wanted to write an article. And the specific project we talk about is a term-long collaboration between students in one of my courses and the YPAR team that Abby co-founded with youth in North Minneapolis. But as we started talking about what we were learning from this experience, we decided that we wanted a way to honor what the YPAR team had written about kinship and build from there. So Quechua scholar Sandy Grande talks about how we need to commit to reciprocity, collectivity, and mutuality, which are all key components of doing participatory research, as many of us have already noted. And she argues, and these are her words, accountability to the collective requires a commitment to engage, extend, trouble, speak back to, and intensify our words and deeds. And I think Abby and I really attempted to do that through writing this article and in how we wrote it. And also even the process of revising and resubmitting, I think became a part of our kinship building, right? So once we got feedback on building on that idea of like kinship, we took, I think, almost a year to kind of talk through the idea, read more about it, think more about the YPAR team's definition and praxis of kinship, and to arrive at where we eventually did. And I want to say that while it's our two voices that you hear mostly in the article, it's deeply inflected with the voices, the ideas, the perspectives, the experiences of all the young people that we both have worked with, as well as many of our fellow adult educators, friends, community members, and comrades, I think all of whom have really shaped our thinking and analysis over the many years that the two of us have engaged with YPAR. All right, I'm going to kick it over to Abby to continue.
Thanks, Anita. Abby Rumbalski, like Anita said, I'm a lecturer at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. And with Anita and her class at Carleton College, and with Youth Rock, which is a university and community connected YPAR team out of North Minneapolis, we embarked on this project because it was a class for Anita, and it was a project that Youth Rock wanted to do in working with youth in social movements and creating lesson plans. So they had already identified that this was something that they wanted to do out of their initial research project in Minneapolis in 2020, asking in an uprising, how do youth move? So that was like an embodied and very real part of our lives with the police murder of George Floyd. And so much that came up out of it then was resulting in what do we do, what can we do, and how do we heal and continue moving in this process. With the writing process, I don't know, Anita, what your perspective is, but we didn't write deeply about kinship, like Anita said, at first. And it was a concept that was brought to us by reviewers. And it was a concept that was so core to Youth Rock that in some ways, I think we wonder, okay, if this is like knowledge owned by youth, can I write about it? But for us, it was deeply reflective of their knowledge to say, no, we need to understand this better. We want to understand what it is in practice and in theory for ourselves, for our teaching, for our research. And so for us to write this piece without young people, but still conferring with them, right? So we would even like text people and be like, hey, what, when you said this in this meeting, like, what did it mean for you? So those continual relationships were really important to us in the writing process, but then also in practical applications. The other thing I would mention is that outside of the writing process, the two of us are very serious about accessing and boosting young people in different ways, even if they don't want to write a scholarly article in this way. Whether it's through the website that they created for lesson plans, whether it's through co-facilitating, and having them paid by school districts to come in and do things with them, right? Like their knowledge and their facilitation is honored in many ways outside of a journal article. And that's something that I think is important. As Anita said, with our long-term relationships, including with some of the people on the Youth Rock team, like that we've known since middle school and high school, facilitating a collective project was really important. And as we reflected on our pedagogy, like we had Zoom classes, we had lessons that they created, we had reflections that they wrote, both from Carleton and from Youth Rock. The kinship was way more than a Zoom class. It was necessary, it was breathful, it was pedagogical, because kinship means something more than collaboration. It means learning from and with each other. There were time for check-ins, querying and questioning our relations and our shared purpose, because we can elicit joy from stories, from activities, from disagreements, from creating connections so that we can learn from each other. So as an example, I don't know if it's possible when we're pinned, but if you can unmute and like say somebody's name and say hi, just for a second, it can be overlapping and everybody can talk at once. I would love that, and then I'll continue.
Hi, Abigail.
Hi, Anita.
Hi, Vaughn.
Hi.
Hey, Flo.
Hi.
Hey, Zoe.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, Karina.
Hey, Esther.
Hi.
Hi, Isaias.
Thank you. Thanks for participating a little bit. But I think, whatever pedagogy we can use to go outside of that space that might seem constricted and hierarchical is really important. So we wanted to build kinship networks within and beyond those institutional boundaries to support relationships that can refashion the role that young people can play, and so that we could take that back into our university and community partnerships to unsettle where there's too much unchallenged hierarchy. Anita, anything else to add?
Yeah, I think maybe just to wrap up, I think we really want to say that not everyone can or perhaps should engage necessarily in like PAR or YPAR, but that I think we can all learn from the ethos and ethics of YPAR about how to engage better in intergenerational solidarity and learning. And we look forward to chatting with you in the small groups.
All right. Thanks so much. We're going to continue the conversation. Just considering the time frame, and I really appreciate, Abby, the shout out for the relational, really exciting work. And we're going to continue our learning with on solidarity and methodological innocence and youth participatory action research.
All right, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Miguel Abad. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Child and Adolescent Development at SF State. And my co-author is also here today, Dr. Jennifer Rennick, who's a faculty member at Michigan State University in the Department of Psychology. And yeah, just quick shout out to Drs. Marciano and Watson, Nicole Springer, and MJCSL for really bringing us together, and really, the journal for really holding it down for such a long time and amplifying community-based scholarship. So just a brief little background. So this paper really starts off with the relationship between myself and Jennifer, who are very much fellow travelers in academia. We went to the same grad program. We're both former youth workers and also doing organizing in different communities and contexts, right? So in the early 2020s, we were both working on different participatory research projects with young people, myself in the Bay Area and Jennifer in Southern California. And we were really noticing things, right, that were resonating across our projects, particularly around sort of navigating tensions, issues with adultism, et cetera, right? I'm sure many of the practitioners here can relate. And at the same time, we were both really thinking through the current literature on YPAR and education that was coming out, especially that were these sort of critical pieces, right? Really powerful pieces around the tensions and hazards and of engaging in that work. So I'll hand it over to Jennifer to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Miguel.
a lot of the literature we were engaging with was sort of shifting as we continue expanding the field of youth participatory action research to really critically reflect on our role as adults facilitating this work, thinking about, what's our responsibilities to young people, how do we offer care without being paternalizing, how are we critically reflecting on how adultism is showing up in that facilitation. And while Miguel and I were really excited about sort of this critical turn in the scholarship, we also wanted to make sure that folks weren't sort of stopping the conversation there, and that this wasn't leading to a term that we ended up using called critical stalemates, where people were feeling a sense of paralysis if this work is just too fraught to do. And so what we were hoping with this paper was to try and push through into this next step of what does it mean to engage in these tensions in a really authentic way, but try and keep showing up and doing this complicated work with young people.
Yeah, so we also want to just be a little bit transparent in terms of the trajectory of this paper, right? So it's gone through a lot of iterations, 2 conference presentations. So for those of you who are grad students, these projects iterate and develop across time. It was submitted elsewhere and was rejected, had a very brief, swift desk reject until we found the calling for this issue, which was a perfect fit.
Yeah. And so also in terms of transparency, for this paper, we wanted it to be, not necessarily traditional empirical paper, more methodologically and conceptually driven. And so what that looked like for Miguel and I was both drawing upon some of the empirical data we had from these youth participatory action research projects as a starting point on reflecting on our processes and practices, but then moving towards generating some reflective facilitator memos, thinking back about the decisions we'd made in those projects. And that led to this iterative process where he and I would write and reflect separately, come together, talk about what we were seeing in commonalities, connect back to the literature, and continue that process until we'd really refined our message and our themes.
Yeah, now just kind of briefly talking about practical implications, and we look forward to talking with folks afterwards. Really, at the end of the day, what Jennifer and I were trying to do is really try to encourage, right, junior scholars to continue thinking about pursuing YPAR collaborations, and in particular, in regards to that, thinking about solidarity as a North Star for navigating, right, some of those tensions that people in different venues were sort of talking about and were really bringing up as hazards and tensions in doing this kind of work, right? So for us, thinking through solidarity was helpful, right? Because YPAR, as we sort of talk about in the paper, is this messy process of building solidarity, right? And so so building across differences, right? Differences in identities, difference in social positions, differences in power, et cetera, the list goes on. So this paper, we really kind of draw from folks like Ruben Gazzambide Fernandez and Pedagogy of Solidarity, and really thinking through, like, how can we push through these really important critiques about doing YPAR work and the messiness and the hazards of it, and get through that critique and really propose a way for researchers, especially junior scholars, to really think about this work in a way that's not paralyzing.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about our paper is definitely iterating or reiterating what Miguel said, and thinking about, oftentimes doing this work where we're trying to achieve these more emancipatory and liberatory goals in our collaborations with young people while still existing in broader societal structures which don't necessarily allow us to achieve those goals in the ways we would like. To think about, we're seeking to build this new world, but we still exist in one that is very complex, and there's a lot of these limitations that exist within it. And so just wanting to provide some transparency in how we were doing decision making within these constraints, to encourage folks to, both take sort of this critical scholarship on here's the ways in which this work may not meet its goals, but also here's ways to keep sort of pursuing those aims and work through those challenges. And we look forward to speaking with y'all more.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And it is really exciting to hear sort of like that process. So thanks for being really transparent with that. Next, we will hear from the authors of A Sacred Communal Pause, How Racially Marginalized Youth's Commitment to Healing Expands Understandings of Activism.
Hey everyone, I'm happy to be here. My name is Lex Hunter. I am a doctoral candidate at the University of Colorado Boulder, and I'm going to be sharing this work alongside Chanel, who's an undergraduate student at CU Denver, but also want to shout out Ben and Celicia, who are a huge part of this work alongside the 8 youth that we did this work with. And to give a little context before we jump in, this project was birthed out of Voices of Healing, which is a project Ben, Celicia, and I co-created in 2022 that thinks about how the intersections of mental health, activism, and healing are related to understandings of social justice with Black, Latina, and Indigenous youth. And during the time of this project, I was 21 or 22, and also identifying as a youth in that time. And yeah, so I'll pass it off to Chanel to kind of give context into our writing process and how that transpired.
Thank you, Lex. So going a bit into our writing process, it kind of started with Lex just outreaching to the YPAR team about seeing who was interested in possibly writing with her. And I was the one that outreached to her and shared my interest. So when we started meeting, it was kind of going over like outlining our goals and timelines that basically honored like our care of the work that we've done, because I believe that we spent about a few months on the YPAR project. And we actually started like the initial planning, like me and Lex started writing in like 2023 of August, and then like we kept meeting all the way up till April 2024. So that was kind of like a 8-month trajectory. But both of us as Black female youth and students, like we were just meeting, and kind of that looked like was having weekly Zoom meetings where both me and Lex just processed and wrote and like reflected on what we wrote in real time. And that kind of looked like going over like our themes and what did we want to highlight throughout our work and what was really sticking out to us. And then we also did like rely on like Ben and Solicia to give us some support as well and like hear their thoughts as well. And then we also like got together, Lex and I, to hang out and work together. And that kind of just made it like a bit different than like the Zoom. It actually like had our like thoughts a bit different processing and like brought more of a communal feel when it came to actually expanding upon the writing. And then both of us ended up sharing out our writing with the broader PAR team altogether. So we actually shared our writing with the whole PAR team that we did our research with, and asked them if they had any thoughts or anything that they wanted to add about what we wrote, or anything that could basically help us with how we could finish writing our paper. And we had feedback, and we ended up implementing that feedback into our writing. And I'll pass it to Lex.
Yeah, thanks, Chanel. I think she really highlights kind of the way we honored our own like distinct experiences on the project. And I think we were pretty explicit as well about where our thoughts were coming from, but also wanted to honor the collective work that was happening. And I think that moves into our application and how we think about that in relation to the field. I think for us, this work really had us think more about what actually tends to count as action research, and particularly working with Black, Latina, and Indigenous organizers and youth activists, really thinking about, are there more expansive ways to think about what counts as action or what counts as movement building and capacity building and sustainment when we are working alongside and collaborating and witnessing the different types of systemic violences and how they manifest in people's lives and really lived realities. And so I think that sacred communal Paul piece really does speak to how the youth were pretty explicit about the need to slow down and to think more expansively about what activism or action might look like for people with varying different social realities. And I think to build on that, we also learned so much about the role of relationality and community. And so the youth actually moved us towards actually hosting a convening to sit with loved ones and community members to reflect on the role of healing and justice, where, you know, in other contexts, there are hypervisible ways that people think about activism and organizing. And so I think that expansiveness that they offered was really cool. And Chanel, do you want to speak to our next point?
Yeah, so something I was thinking about with this was the youth from our team really reminded us that honoring our work within the team also meant honoring our roots. So where we were raised, where we came from, all of those things, because a lot of that we dived into in our writing was generational trauma and kind of like what did we learn from our families, or what did our families learn from their families, and how that's brought up for youth mental health, or just like in youth traditions and just roots in general, and kind of recognizing like how that contributes to our healing and also like the healing justice work as well, and how like even though we can fight to like break like the barriers of generational trauma and all of those things, like we can't always just like we have to go back to honor like our ancestral, our cultural and communal lineages, which means also honoring what was given to us, but also like being able to create new foundations for like our future generations. And I'll pass it back to Lex.
Yeah, and so lastly, we wanted to share that I've been able to actually share this workout with Chanel in a lot of different contexts, and even still being a part of Voices of Healing, been able to work with her in a lot of different capacities, but we think a lot about what does it mean to not only co-design and write, but also like, what does that dissemination process look like in doing the work alongside youth? And as someone myself, like I said, who's a youth, but also in graduate school, I think thinking really tenderly about ways that we can continue to invite and challenge the way that hierarchy functions and how we continue to even co-create knowledge after, like, I would say, like the formal or like tangible project is quote unquote finished. And so I think I'm just grateful to continue to be in spaces with the youth that we work with, and Chanel, where we can continue to think about these things even beyond what is considered like a traditional project cycle. So we will just close with that, and we're excited to talk more in the breakout sessions.
All right. Thank you so much. Let's give like a nice little round of applause to all of our authors for joining us today. And we'll have about 10 minutes now to engage in small group discussion. I believe that Nicole has set up some breakout rooms. I'm going to try and move us fast to make sure we can make the most of about 10 minutes or so in those groups. Nicole, did you have, or Nirja, did you have any further instructions for folks, or can they just select an author team and pop in? Awesome. Great. So thanks, Nicole, for setting up the breakout rooms. They should open up in a second, I'm guessing. If you click that little icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should be able to choose one of the author groups to join, and go ahead and do that. And we'll bring you back together in about 10 minutes. Thank you. All right. I think we might all be back. Vaughn, I'm going to turn it over to you quick.
All right. I just wanted to again note that we really hope you enjoyed the opportunity you had to have conversations with the authors. We thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity to have time and engagement and listen and learn with your work. We're really grateful for everyone's time in joining us today. We had wanted to close with a few key takeaway questions for the range of communities engaging YPAR, and I want to direct you to the editorial that accompanied this themed issue. There's some questions that we posed there for the range of communities. But my takeaway that I want to note is, right, the folks in the room and what might it mean to just as we go back and continue the conversation, right? Reach out to one another, email one another. This is, all right, I'm going to be super quick, Joanne, with my English teacher humor. This is back in the day, right? I was an English teacher for years, and someone shared with me the English teacher joke, which is that I want y'all to consider this a comma in the conversation, not a period. I get it, but I'm
All right.
a
So
comma, not a period. Yeah. So reach out to one another, extend the conversation, continue the conversation. Let's see additional themed issues, right? This is part one. Let's see additional conversations, collaborations, and that sort of thing. And I'll pass it back to Joanne.
yeah, and just like, I want to pick up the point that was mentioned earlier about the importance of us all continuing to be in conversation and citing each other's work. It's really important. I work with a lot of graduate students who say, like, can you write with youth? Can you do this work with youth? And I think that MJCSL is such a fantastic resource for all of us. I want us to continue to like read it and cite it. And again, just really thinking about not just like, okay, look, we did it. We published this special section. Our work is over, right? But like, what do we do next? How do we continue to work together to keep amplifying the voices of youth, which, as we all know is like more important now than, I mean, it's always been important, right? But like we're at like a critical point for us to just continue to do this really hard yet necessary work together. So thank you to everyone for participating. Thanks again to Nicole and Nirja and Patricia for all of your work in making this special section possible. And really looking forward to being in conversation. Please email us, email each other as we all push forward in doing this really necessary work. So thank you.
Hey, Joanne, are you going to share the presentation and everyone?